Under the frozen sky of Mount Karun, where the wind never stopped moving and the snow remembered every soul that failed to return, there lived a white tiger named Arkol, a creature older than the paths men dared to climb, and quieter than the mountain itself, a guardian born not from legend but from endurance, his fur marked with pale gray stripes like scars left by centuries of winter, his eyes carrying the stillness of something that had watched life and death pass without choosing sides. Arkell did not hunt for hunger and did not roar for dominance. He stood, listened, and waited, because his purpose was not to rule the mountain, but to know when the mountain was about to take a life. On the night the storm arrived without warning, Arkell felt the shift before the first scream was swallowed by the wind, a tremor moving through the ice beneath his paws, the kind that only came when humans climbed too high with pride heavier than their ropes. Four of them were trapped near the summit, lost between ridges that looked identical in the blizzard, one of them already bleeding, another trying to keep him awake, their voices cracking as the cold crept into their bones. And when the youngest of them dropped to his knees and whispered into the storm, not for glory or rescue teams, but simply to be allowed to live, Arkal opened his eyes. He moved then, silently, his massive body cutting through the snow without leaving a mark. Joined by Kale and Rune, the other two adult white tigers who had stood watch beside him since before memory mattered. And behind them padded Sira and Nock, the two cubs who still smelled of frost and inheritance. The humans never heard them coming. They only felt the wind ease for a moment, long enough to look up and see pale shapes standing where nothing should have been alive. And fear rooted them in place because they knew instinctively that shouting or running would mean death. Arkell stopped a few steps away and looked at them, not with anger and not with mercy, but with the calm judgment of something that had seen men fall for less honest reasons. And when he lowered his head slightly, the cubs moved forward, one pressing its warm body against the injured man's chest to slow the shaking, the other standing between the group and the screaming wind, as if daring the storm to cross an invisible line. Arkell turned and placed his paw against the ice wall beside him, and the snow began to shift, not collapsing but parting, revealing a narrow ledge buried for generations, a forgotten descent carved by older lives that knew when to leave. And without a sound he began to walk, not looking back, because survival on the mountain was never a gift. It was a choice that had to be followed. The humans stumbled after him step by step, breath by breath, guided by white shapes that moved like memory through the storm, the cubs never leaving the wounded man, the adults forming a barrier that bent the wind just enough to keep them alive. And when they finally reached lower ground where the cold loosened its grip and the storm reclaimed its voice, Arkell stopped. He turned once, fixing his gaze on the man who had knelt in fear, not to warn him or forgive him, but to mark him, because the mountain always remembered who had been spared. And then Arkell stepped back into the snow, followed by his family, their forms dissolving into white until there was nothing left but wind and silence. The survivors were found days later, alive, unable to explain how they had descended, and none of them ever returned to Karun. But sometimes when the world grows too quiet and the cold carries a name through the dark, those who listen carefully swear they hear a voice in the wind asking a single question, not loudly, not cruelly, but with ancient patience. Are you sure you are meant to be here?